So the connection between our gut microbiota and overall human health has more recently been recognized in the literature. When considering the microbiota, we include everything from your mouth to your colon and all the organs in between. This connection may sound surprising at first, and you're probably wondering, how can those bacteria living in my intestinal tract keep me healthy? Well, I was wondering the same thing myself, to be honest. Especially considering that most of us grew up being told that bacteria is bad, it's harmful, don't play in the dirt, bacteria gets you sick. So this concept may even feel contradicting. However, as we unravel the positive attributes of our microbiotic flora, our goal is to see the numerous functions they are carrying out to benefit the body. To name a few, they can help keep our immune system strong, prevent disease, and even impact our mental health through creating neurotransmitters. While I typically believe all organs are created equal, this may just be the most important organ in the human body. As we go through the webinar, we'll be diving more deeply into particular topics. However, I was hoping to begin by laying down the foundations and narrowing our scope as we progress. So first, let's get anatomical. I think it's important to establish what the anatomy of the digestive tract looks like. Your gastrointestinal tract is about 30 feet long. They're comprised of the duodenum, which is the connection between the stomach and the small intestine. That's the portion where everything that's been processed and digested in the stomach will be deposited into the first part of the small intestine. In this area, the duodenum is important. We call it the mixing bowl in anatomy, because all of those pancreatic juices deposited from the pancreas will enter the duodenum. Anything from the liver or gallbladder will also be deposited here. And then, of course, anything passing from the stomach will go through the pyloric sphincter and opening, allowing passage into the duodenum. After food has transited through the duodenum, it'll pass the second and largest part of the small intestine called the jejunum, and lastly, the ileum. The ileum is considered the bridge into the colon. Now you'll hear the large intestine interchangeably referred to as the colon. They're both the same, but the large intestine is comprised of three portions: the ascending, the transverse, and the descending colon. So altogether, these components are strategically arranged in order to fit neatly into your abdominal cavity. And you might be sitting here wondering, well, 30 feet long, I'm not 30 feet tall. How does that even make sense? Well, there's a really incredible anatomical design that allows our body to maximize absorption. And as you notice, everything is kind of neatly packaged into this one area of the abdominal cavity. So if we were able to zoom in on the small intestine and magnify the image, here's what we would see. Within our small intestine, we have these finger-like projections called villi and microvilli. These folds and grooves allow us to increase our absorption by about 600 times. So this strategic anatomical design, in fact, increases the surface area by a significant proportion. To give you a visual to relate to, this is about the same surface area as an entire football field. Impressive, right? So in other words, if you could lay out and stretch all of those microvilli and flatten them out like a pancake, they would have the same surface area as a football field. And this design is important in order to give your body, your digestive tract, the most opportunities to absorb any nutrients and fully break down your food. So to truly maximize the nutritional benefits of the foods that we consume. There's really no coincidence about the design. It is strategic and it's done to maximize function, keeping that in mind. Even the pH, or the acidity and alkalinity in our digestive tract, is optimized for enzymatic digestion. For example, the pH in our stomach is about 2. That's highly acidic, strong enough to put a hole in your living room rug. But this is necessary, this acidic environment, to split the peptide bonds of protein digestion. Conversely, your small and large intestines maintain an alkaline or basic environment, and this is the preferred pH for the bacteria living there, and also helps to optimize enzymatic reactions necessary for digestion. So it's interesting to think about that parts of the digestive system prefer an alkaline environment, while other parts prefer more of an acidic environment. And this wasn't coincidental. When researchers looked into it, it was truly based on what the enzymes and the particular bacteria found there needed for optimal functioning. So far we've been referring to bacteria in a generalized manner. However, when we break down the main characters, we find that our human gut microbiota is comprised of two major phyla or families. These families have fancy, funny names, Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. In general, and what's more important than their names, are that they help us to prevent disease, have more energy, and feel more mentally balanced overall. If that wasn't impressive enough, they also maintain the integrity of our intestinal wall. So when you think about the intestinal wall, it's a barrier. Think of it as your protective lining. Just as your skin helps to prevent anything from entering, our skin is our largest organ and it's our first line of defense. Similarly, that intestinal barrier also is a protective lining. Inevitably, something might be on our food, a pathogen, maybe the person who prepared our food forgot to wash their hands, whatever the case. If something has gotten into our digestive tract, it will be imperative to address it right then and there and prevent it from crossing that protective barrier and entering our cardiovascular system or lymphatic system. So consider that intestinal barrier serving as a protective lining. Just in case any food we've eaten is compromised or contains pesticides throughout the food system or agricultural system, we want to protect it and prevent it from entering our body and wreaking havoc. However, if that lining is damaged, then also our protective layer is compromised as well. You may remember that old saying growing up, you are what you eat. There truly is a lot of honesty in that saying. When we eat poorly, we're not providing the healthy nutrients that our body needs. One study in particular looked at the effects of switching folks accustomed to homemade food, grandma's healthy cooking, to a more westernized fast food diet. These calorie-dense, nutrient-poor food options resulted in higher inflammation and decreased biological diversity inside of our gut or intestines. Over the long run, the participants had a less responsive immunological protection and fewer benefits from their gut bacteria. The takeaway here is our food choices may either support our gut biome or offset beneficial vitamins, minerals, and fiber from entering and supporting all of our body systems. Moreover, eating poorly may damage the gut microbiome and prevent proper nutrient breakdown. Further developments in genome sequencing have allowed researchers to study microorganisms, their specific functions, and connection to human health and disease development. So at this point, you may be wondering, well, what factors shape our gut microbiota? There are multiple factors, and we'll break them down one by one. Several factors play a role in shaping our gut microbiota, but the first one to consider is the mode of delivery. So vaginal or cesarean delivery. 1 in 3 children in the US are born by C-section, myself included. This means that they are not receiving the initial vaginal inoculation of healthy bacteria from their mother. In a way, that initial inoculation primes the newborn with a set of bacterial tools to get their microbiota started. Versus when a child is born through C-section, they're not receiving that same initial set of bacteria. Now, of course, this is something that we can't control, that's not in our hands, but it is something worth mentioning to take into consideration. The second factor is diet during infancy, during those initial stages of growth and development. So the two major ones to consider are breast milk or formula feed. And again, sometimes there are many factors that we have to take into consideration. So I do recognize that sometimes access to breast milk is challenging, especially if the mother is working or returning to school, or there's difficulty with the baby latching or pain through doing so. But at least we need to look at the scientific principles behind it and maybe consider supporting things like milk banks, for example. So when we take a look at the studies behind this, what we find is that formula is far inferior to breast milk. And there are many reasons why. There are immunoglobulins or proteins that are found in breast milk. There are countless additional nutrient benefits, and even the microbiota of the mom that is able to pass and be shared to the newborn infant. No matter how well we try to optimize formula feed, it still remains far inferior to breast milk, which just has the right ratio and proper benefits. I'll give you one other token to consider. Nestle in particular had a strong campaign and presence in third world countries where they were trying to push on formula feed. After studying those infants and comparing them to other infants within the same communities who were still relying on mother's milk, they found a huge difference in the long run in terms of the child's immune system and prevention of disease. So long story short, a diet comprised of formula feed is going to be, of mother's milk rather, is going to be much superior than formula feed. In general, as we're thinking about the child, as they're developing and diversifying their own microbiotic flora, it will be important to provide them with that proper nutrition. We want to diversify and fortify their own intestines to resemble more of the biological diversity of a rainforest, perhaps. A diet comprised of mostly processed or nutrient-poor foods is going to hinder this development, while a diet that is packed in nutritious foods and integrated with pro and prebiotics is going to further diversify the bacterial flora that they have. So we recognize that breast milk is far superior to formula. The third factor to consider are antibiotics. And there are pros and cons to this. So I recognize from a scientific perspective that antibiotics have many positive benefits. They can be life-saving in particular cases. They are used to treat strep throat, staph, bacterial infections, among many more. So in those cases, by all means, they do need to be administered. However, I would like to say that in other cases, we do need to heed with caution. According to the Center of Disease Control, they report that nearly 1/3 of antibiotics prescribed are not needed. And the root cause behind this is that it may actually be a viral infection and therefore will not respond to antibiotics, as those are designed to target only bacteria. Additionally, a major concern of antibiotics is the long-term alteration of our normal and healthy gut microbiota, and the horizontal transfer of resistant genes that could result in a reservoir of organisms with a multi-drug resistant gene pool. So through overprescribing antibiotics, we may actually be building antibacterial resistance. And through this manner, we could be damaging our healthy bacteria that are already present in our intestines and wiping out that gut flora. A similar analogy to visualize, you could compare deforestation, which is damaging the biological diversity of the Amazon rainforest. Similarly, when we are on antibiotics, we are also wiping out that biological diversity, those healthy bugs, those healthy bacteria that are present in our small and large intestine. The diversity of gut bugs differs depending on the location within the digestive tract. So thinking back to that first slide that showed us the digestive tract from the esophagus to the stomach, the small and large intestine. If we hop aboard the magic school bus and start in the esophagus and travel distally down to the rectum, we find that the diversity and amount of bacteria increases. For example, one type of bacteria, Streptococcus, appears to be the dominant genus in the bottom of our esophagus, duodenum, and jejunum, while other parts of the digestive system seem to be habitated or home to other types of bacteria where they dominate those regions. If we layer on a microbiological perspective, we find that time spent outdoors in nature, playing in the dirt, gardening, all play an important role. These activities introduce friendly bacteria and further improve the diversity found in our digestive tract. Studies have shown that children who grow up spending more time outdoors in nature have a more diversified bacteria flora than their comparative peers who were primarily indoors. When we're outside gardening, getting our hands dirty in the soil, our bodies are interacting with the trillions of microorganisms present in the soil. Those good bugs interact with ours and further strengthen our personal micro crew. Historically, prior to World War II, half of the households in the USA participated in gardening, and this was a wonderful positive attribute. But as we witnessed the technological boom and the more presence of technology in our lives, naturally, we spent more time indoors, further detaching from nature. And I say this with a grain of salt because I do recognize that participating in a home or community garden may not be easily accessible for everybody due to weather, living arrangements such as living in apartments, or geographic locations. However, the benefits are there, they're present, and they're important. And when we can take time to go out for a hike, dig in the dirt, spend time at a local park or community garden, it is going to benefit you. Two of my favorite books, Last Child in the Woods and The Nature Fix, both delve deeper into this relevant topic. They consider the nature deprivation theory. So for those of you out there interested in learning more about those topics, I highly recommend those books. And I think particularly in this day of age where we are still surviving in an ongoing pandemic, this is important to point out. As many of us, are spending more time indoors, our jobs may have moved to be remote, and maybe we don't have as many of those opportunities to get out and connect with nature. Our most densely populated areas in the communities are in the cities, and inner city areas we know don't have as much access to nature, or maybe more further removed from gardening opportunities or going for a hike or forest bathing, for example. But it is important to note that in the soil and when we are in nature, we are exposed to an abundance of different microorganisms that benefit to just further increase our exposure and that biological diversity found in our digestive tract. So overall, when supporting our loved ones and personal health, take into consideration these above mentioned factors. Essentially, you are in charge of shaping the gut microbial flora and thereby supporting all of the body's 11 systems. As we consider growth and development, it's important to take a look at the lifespan following birth. This is an illustration of the typical developmental colonization of the gut by bacteria. The initial colonies of bacteria that settle depend upon the delivery method. So as we mentioned, C-section versus typical vaginal inoculation. In the first week of life, there's something called TLR. TLR is our toll-like receptor signaling pathways. These play a crucial role in our innate immune system by recognizing pathogens. So their job is kind of like a detective to identify and recognize pathogens that enter the body. Well, interestingly, in that first initial stages of life of development, that TLR, that innate immune system response, is reduced. We believe this is reduced to allow for the formation of stable bacterial colonies in the gut. So interestingly, your body has this designed mechanism to kind of simmer down your own immune system so that your bacterial flora can begin to develop and diversify and colonize the gut. If it was amped up, it would be fighting off anything that was initially introduced to the body and maybe not allowing that diversification to take place. So during the first 6 months, as children are subjected to solid foods and bacteria in their environment, the diversity of the microbiota increases. Moving forward, the immune system is able to differentiate and know the difference between pathogenic or harmful and helpful bacteria. And disease appears to correlate with bacteria concentration and composition. In order to prevent disease, we depend on an integral symbiotic relationship between humans and our gut. So before I get carried away here, it's important to first define and give examples of symbiotic relationships. They exist all throughout nature, and you may have been exposed to different types of examples. If we consider the aquatic world, the marine world, coral reefs are a great example. They have a symbiotic relationship with zooxanthellae, where we notice when that internal inhabitant dies off, the coral reefs also suffer and may not survive as well. Other marine examples include certain types of whales and whale sharks as well, where you'll notice small fish following them along. Those fish are there to receive protection from these large protective animals. They're kind of the bosses of the marine world, but in turn, they may help by eating small microorganisms or helping to clean the whale's teeth, for example. The takeaway here is that they both benefit. Both parties are receiving a positive benefit. If you would like a terrestrial example on land, pollinators and flowers have co-evolved together a beautiful symbiotic relationship and attribute all of our fruit, vegetable, flower ability to produce those from an agricultural sense. Additionally, a fig tree and a wasp also have a symbiotic relationship in the manner through which a wasp may only continue its species through laying its eggs inside of the fruit of the fig. And then in turn, when the baby hatches, it is able to eat upon the nutrients of the fig. And then when it leaves the fig plant, it will spread its seeds wherever it travels, wherever its path takes it. Well, similarly with humans, we've also developed and co-evolved throughout evolution to have a symbiotic relationship between us and the bacteria that grew to inhabit our bodies. From an immunological perspective, microorganisms are viewed as pathogens by the host immune system, which typically recognizes and eliminates them. However, the majority of our gut bacteria are non-pathogenic and thereby cohabit and live within our enterocytes or our intestinal cells in a symbiotic and beneficial relationship. The gut commensal organisms predominantly aid in many ways. I'll give you some examples: through nutrient metabolism, drug metabolism, prevention of colonization of pathogenic or harmful microorganisms, and through keeping our intestinal barrier strong and functioning. So that was a lot. To recap, they help us to break down and really reap the benefits of the foods that we eat to maximize nutrient absorption, so vitamins and mineral absorption. They also help us with certain types of fiber that are insoluble, but our bacteria have different types of enzymes that can, in fact, break down those types of fibers. They additionally help us with drug metabolism, and they help to prevent the harmful bacteria, the pathogenic microorganisms, from taking host inside of our intestine, therefore protecting us against certain preventable diseases. And the last one was to maintain the integrity of the intestinal barrier. So they'll actually repair the intestinal barrier along that wall, keeping that wall nice and strong. Similar to if you had a fence around your garden and that fence was compromised, you could also go in and repair it to keep critters out. Well, our healthy bugs, our healthy microbiome is doing a similar, carrying out a similar function. In other words, if that intestinal wall is damaged, because there's a lot of action, a lot of friction happening in there, it will also go back in and repair that damage to maintain the integrity of that barrier. If you take a look at the image on the right, a couple to point out are that about 90% of all diseases can be traced back in some way to our gut and the health of our microbiome. And when you consider our genes and compare them alongside our genes and then the genes of bacteria, what you find are that it's a 100-to-1 ratio. The genes of our microbiome significantly outnumber ours. And then if you compare cell to cell, you're only about 10% of who you are. And that one I find a little bit comical, because when you think about it, we imagine that our cells for sure outnumber all of the cells of the bacteria. But in fact, if you measure the cells that live along all parts of your body, including our skin, the largest organ, we are significantly outnumbered. So we truly have co-evolved to have this collaborative relationship and symbiosis with these healthy bugs, these positive bacteria. And I find that interesting to note, because I think that they really do have a lot of positive benefits that we sometimes don't necessarily consider when we think about how to keep ourselves healthy and fight off any invasive pathogens or other microorganisms that could be harmful to us. So to recap, throughout evolution, the human body has selected and strategically selected particular bacteria it rendered safe. Eventually, over time, throughout evolution, a symbiotic relationship was developed between the two, where the bacteria has a warm, cozy home, a consistent supply to food, and lives inside of our intestines. On the other hand, the human or the host is benefiting from having a health boost, a stronger immune response, and survival advantages that the bacteria is surviving. Now, aside from the symbiotic relationship, the genetic level is also worthy of consideration. So we're going to switch gears to spend a little bit more time considering the genetic aspect. A human has 26,000 genes, while a rice plant, yes, rice has about 46,000 genes. Well, what's up with that? When you look at that gene comparison, it's quite alarming to think about. Well, what's even more interesting is that there are 100 trillion bacteria that comprise our microbiome. And 90% of the cells in your body are microbial, in fact. So only 10% of the cells in your bodies are neural cells or muscular cells or cardiac cells in the heart. The remaining 90%, surprisingly, are actually bacterial. So if you take a look at this, some of them that I find interesting to point out is that your composition of your microbiotic flora is as personal as a fingerprint. So each person, if we took a small sample and compared my microbiotic flora to yours, to a family member, to a friend's, each and every single one of us would have our own unique set, our own biological diversity. And then the digestion and protection against infection may also be unique. But we're finding a lot of incredible bridges and comparisons between the two and linking them to disease prevention, or just in general, helping to keep our immune system strong, and then providing the rest of our body systems with the important vitamins and minerals that they need to optimize their own functioning. We're considering that our gut is almost like a door or an opening to the rest of the body. And if you think about it, it's the first opportunity to support the rest of your systems. In other words, whenever we eat food, we consume food often to reap the benefits, to reap the positive benefits that they contain. Hippocrates was well known for saying, you are what you eat, and with thy food you can prevent, through food you are honestly giving yourself medicine, or giving yourself the opportunity to prevent disease in the long run. So as we consider these things and we are making day-to-day decisions, it's worthy noting that this is really our first way, and perhaps the most important way, to support that fascinating world and the gut organisms that reside and live there. Now, this field of work has uncovered a revelation in our understanding of human physiology. Scientists consider the gut our second brain. This is based on its ability to control as much of our physical and mental functions as the 3-pound brain housed in our skull. So your skull is about, if you were to weigh just the brain in your skull, it's about 3 pounds. And interestingly, the amount of bacteria, if you could somehow gather it up and also weigh it, pound for pound, they are the same. We have considered throughout evolution and history that our gut is perhaps the second brain. It has the ability to communicate and regulate functions of other systems, as our brain and neurological system has the capacity to do so as well. Historically, ancient physicians speculated that the gut-brain connection existed, but perhaps did not have the tools to fully understand it on a deeper level as we do today. The vagus nerve, for example, is part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which oversees a vast array of crucial bodily functions, including controlling our mood, our immune response, our digestion, and heart rate. It establishes one of the connections between the brain and the gastrointestinal tract, and sends information about the state of the inner organs to the brain via the afferent fibers. So in other words, this vagus nerve has the ability to almost check in with other organs and communicate those messages and signals to the brain. So if there is something that needs to be improved, or if we're noticing that the heart has an elevated high blood pressure, that signal can be communicated, and it creates almost like a messaging network or connection. This connection was first discovered in 1921 when stimulation of the vagal nerve decelerated the heart rate or slowed the heart rate down. This was demonstrated for the first time by Otto Louis and was attributed to the first neurotransmitter ever discovered. That first neurotransmitter was acetylcholine. Acetylcholine has the ability to slow down the heart rate. Interestingly, neurotransmitters that can speed up or slow down the heart rate have an opposite effect on our digestive system. And you could spend a whole class just studying the fight or flight response and the rest and digest response. But the takeaway is if your body is in a stimulated condition where the heart rate is elevated, perhaps you're exercising, perhaps you're stressed out, the heart rate is going to be elevated, while those neurotransmitters sent to the digestive tract will slow down or decrease digestive functioning. On the converse, if you are in a rest and digest state, then your heart rate will be slowed down, and other neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine will travel to the digestive tract and stimulate digestion, optimize digestion, and take away some of the stimulation from other body organs. This gut-brain connection may be the key link between modern disease epidemics globally. The included modern diseases range from cardiovascular disease to obesity and perhaps even mental health benefits. This news is exciting because it engages numerous fields of study and provides another avenue for health professionals to prevent disease and support those who have developed a condition. If we think back to the initial stages of development, I had mentioned to you that each infant is exposed to different environments. But keep in mind that by the age of 3, their microbial flora is similar to that of an adult. Therefore, those beginning years of life are crucial in developing a robust, diverse, endogenous bacterial community. So what if we had better tools to provide healthcare professionals so that they could more provide individualized attention and support through a nutritional aspect for young mothers with children to help optimize those initial years of development, to give them the best set of healthy microbiota in their guts. So as we consider this and we think about it, our gut and our brain are both physically and biochemically connected, going back through the vagus nerve. If we consider neurotransmitters or chemical messengers, these are produced in the brain and they have the ability to travel throughout the body and impact any target cell. It's similar to sending a letter in the mail or sending a text message to somebody. You can consider that a messenger that may have an appropriate response and it's reaching a target person. Well, our body doesn't have the ability to communicate in this manner. Instead, it uses neurotransmitters or chemical messengers to carry out a response. And that response is acted upon by the target cell or the destination. Well, one neurotransmitter in particular, serotonin, is considered the nature's natural antidepressant. Well, guess what? You're going to be surprised to find that 90%, yes, 90% of serotonin is not produced in the brain. In fact, it is produced inside of our guts, in our intestinal tract. In other words, our gut produces neurotransmitters. And yes, these neurotransmitters, these chemical messengers, have a direct impact on our mental health, including our mood and our body's ability to regulate. And again, that was through serotonin, which is a critical neurotransmitter that is able to help us to regulate our mood and impacts many organs throughout the body. Now, the previous school of thought estimated that microbiotic flora was about 500 or so species. However, more recent research has illustrated that this was a very low estimate. We now believe that the collective human gut microflora is composed of over 35,000 bacterial species. So we went from thinking it was about 500, not so diverse, to now understanding that the typical microbiotic flora, if you could take a sample from individuals across the world, you would find that they have about 35,000 bacterial species residing inside of their digestive tract. Within these species, we advocate for diversity. So the take-home message is that diversity is the most important. You don't want to just have one type of bacteria or a handful, but rather optimizing that diversity. meaning having different species of healthy bacteria will increase the human health benefits. So going back to the connection we had made on antibiotics, when we are utilizing antibiotics, unfortunately, they are decreasing or hindering that biological diversity that is found in our intestinal tract. So that is something worthy to note. And in the case of appropriate use, medical use of antibiotics, it will be imperative once we've finished taking those antibiotics to improve our bacterial colony again, to try to promote that diversity. And we'll talk about how to do so through strategic nutrition. But that's something to note, is that we do want to really maximize and promote this biological diversity. The image on the right, I think, is a nice visual because it gives you kind of a big overarching sum. And it lends some insight that it's not just one particular thing that we can point to. It's more of a multifaceted approach. A part of this you could look at as genetics. Of course, we do inherit some genetics from our folks, but that is by no means set in stone. Our geographical location is going to be important. So where we live, our access to certain microorganisms found in the soil, our access to the environmental different places we have, parks, recreation facilities, having the ability to go on hikes, participate in opportunities in forests or national parks. So all of these factors play a role. Even the environmental quality that we have around us, air quality, for example, has been a very prevalent or hot topic these days. The mode of delivery, that was one that we covered, vaginal versus that initial inoculation through vaginal birth versus C-section. Our diet, we'll delve into that one a little bit more. But in general, the takeaway is that a diet that is highly processed, full of fast food, is not going to be providing us with the optimal tools that we need to maximize the health benefits here. And then other factors such as lifestyle habits, the amount of sleep and how consistent that sleep is, exposure to consistent stress, and our ability to partake in exercise, all of these factors play a role. So there's no one tool or one kind of sneak peek, but rather this multifaceted approach that we're finding. Well, I did want to share with you in particular one Danish study that looked at the gut microbiome and their function, worked with 123 non-obese participants and about 170 obese individuals. What they found, or their results, was this concept of a high gene count and a low gene count, both of which had implications on health and disease. What the researchers reported was interesting. The high gene count individuals have a functionally robust gut microbiome and lower prevalence of metabolic disorders and obesity. On the other hand, participants that had a low gene count harbored a high proportion of pro-inflammatory bacteria, the bacteria that are going to be harmful and increase inflammation throughout our body, both of which were found to be associated with inflammatory bowel disease. So when we consider the gene count, we're referring specifically to the bacterial gene count, the ones that we said we have about 35,000 different bacterial species. So when they looked at and compared these participants, folks who were maybe not having the healthiest of diets had a significantly lower gene count than other folks who maybe had a healthier lifestyle and a multifaceted approach to all of this and improving their biological diversity. In terms of public health disease prevention, this is crucial. If you're somebody that's interested or a profession working in a public health or community health aspect, this could be a way to positively support and impact an entire community or on a larger perspective. If we take a look at the plethora of conditions that our gut bacteria play a role in preventing, the list is quite astonishing. Many of you will recognize that they are among some of the top concerns from a community health perspective. And when we support or we look at our public health, sometimes we're leaning on the side of intervention when the condition has already occurred, when the stages are later in development. What if we could concentrate more of our efforts on prevention and preventing these conditions from manifesting and from reaching those later stages of development, I think we could have a higher success rate, and to help keep folks healthier, help keep them out of the hospital to begin off with. The stronger our immune system is, the better off we'll be at fighting and preventing many different pathogens from wreaking havoc in our bodies. Interestingly, too, our gut bugs have a circadian rhythm, a sleep-wake cycle. You may know from your own routine how critical this is to your functioning. When you don't get enough sleep, you're kind of off. You might not be as productive at work. You may not be as able to help your significant other around home, or may not be as present in your day-to-day life. So we know that our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle, is incredibly important for our own body's functioning, to be at our own optimal health. Well, interestingly, when your sleep-wake cycle is impaired, not only does your daily productivity suffer, but also your gut bacteria are impacted as well. They too are affected. When you don't sleep, their performance is altered too. In other words, they have a night and day rhythm, just like us. So when our sleep routine is off, they are negatively impacted and may not be as effective through nutrient digestion and metabolism. They may not be as effective at preventing pathogens from entering, or may not be as great at repairing that intestinal barrier. We also know that physical activity is important. And what we have found is that consistent physical activity can actually stimulate additional gut bug growth, so to help increase that diversity. After all, they do make up 90% of our cells and who we are. So it's pretty important to consider this significant composition. So ever wonder why we are getting more bacterial resistance? Every time that we take antibiotics, it changes our biome, and sometimes it never rebuilds properly again. If you need to do it, it's important. We talked about the pros of antibiotics, as we recognize there are many important reasons to do so. But also take into consideration that being outside, that playing in the dirt, that having exposure to many different microorganisms that are naturally present in our soil are going to be important, especially when we want to rebuild our healthy bugs in our digestive tract. So when we are thinking about how can we better support, the best way is through choosing whole food and real food, food that is as close to its natural form as possible. So moving away from processed foods, because processed foods are going to destroy many of the vitamins and minerals just accidentally through the procedure of presenting that food to us. Sometimes they're using very high temperatures. Sometimes that food is fried. Sometimes it's just been sitting out very long through the transportation process to get it from California, for example, to the East Coast. The longer that the food is taken from its source, from the soil, the less the nutritional composition will be present there. Many of our vitamins, for example, are not as strong or stable as we may like them to be. So the longer that process takes, the less we're reaping the benefits, even though we're still consuming them. And that's one reason why having a home garden or participating in a community garden is important, because you can take it right from the dirt to your doorstep, and therefore decrease the amount of time it takes to get to your dinner plate and increase the nutritional benefits. Well, it is also important to consider, aside from consuming whole foods and real food, that fermented foods are incredibly important for our bodies. So why specifically? Well, there are certain foods that are going to be far superior in terms of helping us and providing the benefits that our body needs. These are fermented foods, things like kimchi, kefir, yogurt, and sauerkraut, and also many healthy lipids. Lipids include things like avocados, nuts, seeds, and olive oil. There was a campaign, I want to say in the late 80s, that tried to sell us from a food marketing perspective that fats were bad, that they kind of used that and twisted that in a nutritional aspect. So you might have noticed a lot of yogurt companies were saying no fat or low fat on their yogurt containers. Well, I want to strike that and remind us that lipids are incredibly important. Matter of fact, lipids are components of our nervous system. They line many of our nerves. They comprise the myelin sheaths that speed up those communication between nerves. They're part of the brain. They're part of the cushioning in our joints. So lipids are important, but we do want to be mindful about consuming healthy lipids. And those are going to be found in our avocados, our nuts, our seeds, and many of our healthy oils. Like you can find avocado oil, olive oil, for example. So to recap, we want to choose minimally processed food. When we are preparing our food, we want to try to lightly steam. And the reason why we're advocating for using lower temperatures is because some of our vitamins and minerals cannot tolerate high temperatures. So really high temperatures like a fryer, for example, destroys some of those vitamins and minerals. It doesn't give them a chance to reach your digestive system so that you have the opportunity to absorb them and reap the benefits from those foods. So try to lightly steam or saute foods when possible, choose whole foods, and try to select options that are nutrient dense. So they're packed in vitamins and minerals, and rather than caloric dense options. And on the right-hand side, you can see some examples. Some of these might be foods that you like. Some of them might be ones that you're not interested in. My biggest piece of advice when giving nutritional advice is to choose the foods that you know you can stick to. So if you know you've tried sauerkraut in the past, you were not a big fan, by all means, don't try to force yourself to select that option, but choose something that in the long run is going to be an option that you can set as a goal and be consistent in consuming. So whether that's kefir or yogurt, that might be an easy hit for you, something that is more palatable, more enjoyable, that you can incorporate into your diet in the long run. So choose the foods that work for you. But if you're interested in branching out of the box a little bit and trying something new like kimchi for the first time, or having a glass of kombucha, they do come in many different flavors. So hopefully you can find one that is going to fit with you and be something that you can incorporate into your diet. But one note I would like to say on yogurt, please check the sugar content, as sometimes when marketers will slap on the label no fat or low fat, instead they're ratcheting up the sugar content. So check that the sugar isn't outrageously high. Unfortunately, some brands are notorious for using misleading advertising to market their products when in fact the costs are going to outweigh the benefits. So just something to keep in mind. Now, another important consideration from a nutritional aspect is fiber. When we think about this category, fiber is broken up into soluble and insoluble. The easiest way to think about this is that soluble fibers are ones that we can easily digest, meaning that we have the proper enzymes to break them down, versus insoluble fibers are ones that our digestive system may not easily break them down, but we do reap many positive benefits from them. In other words, insoluble fibers give your body kind of a workout. They work all of the intestinal tract, and they prevent things like diverticulosis, which can cause adults to have polyps that form that are very painful and can be harmful. So through the consumption of insoluble fibers, we help to keep that intestinal tract, that muscle layer, strong and healthy. We almost give it a workout. So if you wanted a quick example of something that has both soluble and insoluble fiber, consider an apple. Most of us consume apples, and they can grow on both the West and the East Coast, and even along the mountainous areas of Colorado. An apple has both soluble and insoluble fibers. The outer skin is going to be more cellulose comprised, and that's more insoluble fibers, versus the crunch, the pectin on the inside, when you bite into and crunch into that apple, that's full of rich soluble fibers. The biome itself can harvest about 10 to 15% additional calories from the food that we eat. So it has the ability to extract more fiber, more calories rather, from things such as insoluble fibers. Endogenous bacteria, or bacteria that live in our body, contain their own set of enzymes. So our digestive system, you could say, has its own tools, its own set of enzymes, but we don't have all of them. Our toolkit is not complete. So we truly need to rely upon the enzymes that our own bacteria provides for us. It's just that they've, throughout evolution, developed their own tool set, and that tool set is going to be helpful in allowing us to unlock additional vitamins and minerals that may be tied up throughout digestion. So we lack our own unique enzymes, but bacteria make up for it and help us to break down our food on a deeper level. When gut bacteria digest fiber, they produce short-chain fatty acids. These short-chain fatty acids are used to repair the intestinal lining. So remember when I told you they help to maintain the integrity of that intestinal wall? Here's what I was talking about. They can actually break down fiber and convert it into these short-chain fatty acids that then can almost serve as material like glue to fix a patch on a wall. So going back to the analogy, imagine if there's a tear in your garden fence or a compromised wall at home, you too will need to gather the right set of tools to fix it. Well, we need to provide our body with fiber, both soluble and insoluble, to have the correct or appropriate ingredients or tools in order to repair that intestinal lining, which is needed to support us through the proper nutrients. So through consumption of fiber, we're given those proper nutrients and we can be consistent with keeping that intestinal barrier, that intestinal wall nice and strong, so to prevent any pathogens from getting into our cardiovascular or lymphatic systems. So it's nice to have some visuals and kind of some quick hits that you can take with you. So you've probably heard the terms prebiotic and probiotic before, but maybe didn't have as much of clarification around it. When you think of prebiotics, they're the non-digestible carbohydrates. They're kind of like the food for our good bacteria. So prebiotics feed our probiotics. We need both. Both are essential. When they're combined, they're optimizing that healthy environment. So just having the healthy good bugs in your intestinal tract, just having that healthy bacteria isn't enough. You need to keep it alive. We're providing the nutrition for it so that we can reap the health benefits that they provide for us. And that's where prebiotics come into play. Researchers worldwide have identified lists of foods that they consider work as prebiotics. These foods are important because they stimulate the growth of healthy bacteria inside our intestines. The list provided is not entirely encumbersome of everything, but it does give you numerous examples to look to. It includes things like chickpeas, artichokes, nuts, seeds, tea, red wine. Yes, have a glass of red wine, honey, bananas, among more. So it's our responsibility to not only feed ourselves in a healthy manner, but also nourish the bacteria that reside within our guts. This nourishment helps them to continue their important work, provides those probiotics, that good bacteria, with the tools that they need. Additionally, things like tea, coffee, certain fruits, vegetables, I mentioned red wine, but dark chocolate too. All of these contain polyphenols. These polyphenols, or everything in this group, are naturally occurring antioxidants. Our antioxidants are important. They're kind of like the cleanup crew in your body. So we have a lot of free radicals that build up in our body. Consider them internal rusting, like salt may cause the undercarriage of a car to rust. Well, our metabolic mechanisms also cause a lot of free radicals to build up in our body and cause internal rusting in our systems. Well, antioxidants that we naturally get from those pre-listed items like tea, coffee, fruits, vegetables, dark chocolate, all those polyphenols categories provide antioxidants and kind of travel around your body, picking up and binding to any free radicals and preventing them from damaging the cells and the mechanisms of your body. So taking a look at this list, and you're more than welcome to have your own maybe on your phone that you can take to the grocery store. Same piece of advice: choose the ones that work for you, that are going to help you be consistent, and ones that you can stick to. But by all means, if you've never boiled an artichoke before, give it a try. Dip it in some butter. It tastes pretty good. So give yourself the opportunity to try different fruits and vegetables, different legumes, and keep in mind that these are prebiotics that are going to be food to keep those probiotics nice and healthy and working at optimal functioning. So some of the functional aspects of the gut. These include that the gut microbiota maintains a symbiotic relationship with the gut mucosa and imparts substantial metabolic, immunological, and gut protective functions in a healthy individual. The gut microbiota, which derives its nutrients from the host dietary components and sheds epithelial cells, is an organ by itself with an extensive metabolic capability and substantial functional plasticity. When we say functional plasticity, we're referring to something being flexible. So when we think about each person having perhaps a different metabolism, we've heard, oh, you've got a fast metabolism, or this person has a slower metabolism, and that can change throughout life, throughout our different stages of life. It is nice to know that some of that metabolic regulation is going to be from the gut, or in other words, those healthy bugs are going to play a role in helping to optimize and support our metabolism. And also from an immunological perspective, help to keep us healthy. The gut microbiota largely derives their nutrients from dietary carbohydrates. Fermentation of those carbohydrates that escape proximal digestion, so ones that aren't digested and used by our own body for our own supply of energy, or for example, to different organs in the body, any of those dietary carbohydrates that escape digestion, or things like indigestible oligosaccharides, result in those short chain fatty acids. I know there's a lot of technical terms, but the takeaway here is that those short chain fatty acids are rich sources of energy. They are utilized by the bacteria that we are hosting, and they're also utilized to protect that intestinal barrier, to keep repairing it. You can imagine when food travels down your esophagus, there's a lot of friction. There's damage to the esophageal lining. There's damage in your stomach. Remember that pH of 2 highly acidic environment. Every 3 days, your stomach has to repair the lining, the cells that comprise your stomach. Similarly, in your small and large intestine, there's a lot of action going on. We constantly need to repair. But in order to carry through those repairs, we have to have the correct tool set. And that tool set comes from our dietary intake. So many of our carbohydrates, particularly the ones that we consider indigestible or those insoluble fibers, are going to be beneficial in ways that we previously didn't understand, that they can be converted and used as repair mechanisms, in fact. So part of this mechanism prevents also the buildup of metabolic byproducts. Through metabolism, we have a lot of byproducts or outputs that can start to build up. So part of this mechanism is designed to try to remetabolize or absorb some of these byproducts and prevent them from kind of building up and backing up the system, you could say. Listen to your gut. We've all heard this before, and I think it's an easy one to remember. But as you make food choices, consider keeping your gut bacteria as diverse as the Amazon rainforest. Consider that your health is to a large degree dependent on the life and vibrancy of bacteria that inhabit your personal rainforest. And trust me, no one likes a barren wasteland lacking vegetation, and neither does your body. A gut bacteria that is incredibly diverse is only going to serve to optimize your health. And only you can support your gut bacteria through daily nutritional and lifestyle choices. The goal is to choose minimally processed foods. If you can and have the time, prepare your veggies raw, lightly steamed, or sauteed to preserve their nutrients. If you have access to the source, if you can go through a food co-op, or I know in California, there are a lot of food boxes that will deliver to your home, or better yet, if you can participate in your own home garden or community garden, you're bringing that food right from the dirt to your doorstep. And that is the best way to preserve that nutrient content, those vitamins and minerals that can sometimes be susceptible to different temperature or time that it takes to deliver them to the grocery stores. And then from the grocery stores, who knows how long they've been sitting on the shelves, to your refrigerator at home. So keep in mind that you want to minimize that processing. You want to try to choose a diversity of food options and ones that are going to be probiotics to really support your own body and also incorporate soluble and insoluble fibers. As a country, unfortunately, in the USA, we fall very short on our fiber intake. When we look at a study across all states of the country, many Americans are falling short on fiber dietary intake. And that's one correlation that we're seeing in terms of chronic disease that is linked to fiber consumption. So that's one that we can be more mindful about and incorporate into our diet on a consistent capacity. Now, I did want to share with you a couple of future implications as we're wrapping up. So regarding future implications, the APC Microbiome Institute of Ireland, intrigued by the link between the gut and the brain, is researching how modern diets and lifestyles impact the gut-brain connection. Furthermore, researchers are exploring how to design interventions that support the microbiota to prevent chronic diseases. So how incredible would it be if we could have individualized mechanisms or individualized recommendations that could help folks stay on track and keep their gut bugs healthy and thereby prevent the prevalence of chronic disease in our country as a whole. Through certain types of bacteria, goals included are to enhance memory, to improve mood, to help with even stress behavior and stress responses in our body. And there's capacity to decrease stress hormone prevalence in the body too. In conclusion, through nutritional intake and environmental exposure, we support our gut microbiome, maintaining a rich ecosystem and optimizing our immune, neural, and digestive health. Visualize having a microbiotic flora equally as diverse as the Amazon rainforest or the Sea of Cortez. And that's something that we all hold in the palm of our hands. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today, and I was hoping to share one last thing with you folks. We work hard in Antioch University to keep our continuing education courses vibrant, engaging, and fun. And we try to continuously have that course list as diversified and as expanded as possible. So by all means, feel free to check back in there, see what courses we're offering throughout the year, and we'll do our best to meet a multifaceted approach, as we know folks come from all different backgrounds and professions. But at this point, I would like to turn off the recording and open up the floor for questions and facilitate the discussions. As I mentioned, that's honestly the funnest part, is hearing from everybody and learning from all the wisdom that we bring to the table.